everyone, welcome back to Horsepower Obsessed. Today we're going to talk about the C8R and the fact that we have recently just seen some pictures of the engine bay and some other pictures showing that it is getting ready for Daytona. Alright guys, so as you know, the C8R has been a little bit of a tease for us C8 Corvette fans recently. Especially if you agree that the C8R is likely to mirror what the C8 Z06 is going to look like in the hopefully near future. Now with all that said, the C8R is going to be on the track this year, of course, and it's going to be very soon. Now Daytona's coming up here very quickly, but what we have this weekend is the Roar Before the 24. What that is basically these cars get out there, kind of go through the paces, and just make sure that they're going to be able to compete without any kind of problems. Now, because of that, we get some nice footage of the C8R on the track, tearing it up, and it looks fantastic. Now, there's a couple different pictures that have come about. One of them is 3 C8s, 2 of them being C8Rs, in what looks like a fantastic mirage of America. As you can see here, guys, we got the C8 on the left. The middle is the yellow C8R, and the right is the silver C8R, all right underneath that American flag. Nothing says America more than this picture here, but the most important picture to come out of all of this stuff is actually this one. This actually shows somebody working on some of the engine aspects of the car, and somebody with a quick trigger finger was able to snap a picture of it. Now, the biggest thing that I think is interesting in this picture, other than the fact that it's an amazing looking engine bay, that air scoop. Now, as you can tell, the air scoop is obviously pulling air in from the back of the car right into the air intake and then into the engine. So why this is interesting is because the C8 by itself doesn't have an air intake right there. The air is actually pulled from the left side of the car from the air scoop all the way around the back bumper and then into the engine from there. Now, there's a couple reasons I'm sure they're doing this, but the biggest one is very likely they put a radiator there instead. So if you guys haven't seen the video review I've done of the exterior of the C8 Corvette, I'll link it up to the top right of this video so you can check it out. But in that video, I point out that the passenger side air scoop has a transmission cooler in it, and the driver's side air scoop doesn't have a visible radiator at all. It's actually split into 3 different areas. One is for the air intake for the engine, the other 2 are brake coolers for the rear of the car. Because of that, there is no visible radiator on the left driver's side of the car. Now, obviously with the C8R, it needs more cooling because GM decided to put the air intake on the back to thus free up that left driver's side scoop for a radiator. That's likely the reason, but at the same time, that's not 100% confirmed. Either way, it's pretty cool. I think the air scoop look is really awesome, and if they did do that to free up the air scoop on the side for an additional radiator for additional cooling, then I'm all for it. If the C8R ends up being the precursor to the C8 Z06, then stuff like this is a must. I definitely don't want to see another situation with Chevy releasing a Corvette, especially the Z06, and it having any kind of overheating problems on the track. The best way for them to make sure that that is not a problem is definitely by throwing as many radiators at this thing as they possibly can. Now, aside from that, of course, you're going to notice a bunch of different things in the picture that aren't necessarily what you're going to see in a C8 Z06 or even the base model C8 at this point. There's a lot of tube style framework here that is not ever going to make it to the street because those are going to allow structural rigidity to be high, but the weight of the car to be low, and it's designed in a much different way than anything you're going to see on the street. So stuff like that's obviously not going to make it to the production cars that you and I can buy. But there are a couple other points in this picture that are interesting. Number one is the arm of the wing in the background there. You can tell that is not bolted onto the lid of the car. It looks like it is going straight down to the frame. So just like the C7 ZR1, that huge rear spoiler is bolted to the frame of the car. It's not just sitting on top of the trunk. Now with a car like this, I would expect that kind of stuff. The car is supposed to be functional first and maybe pretty second. But in this case, of course, everything here is going to be 100% functional. And that's the kind of stuff that I hope we get with the Z06 as well. What I think think is pretty interesting here is we get a bunch of carbon fiber pieces on the engine bay that are completely non-visible under normal circumstances. So this is definitely cool to see, but at the same time, I'm wondering why they would do that unless it's strictly for weight savings. But nonetheless, again, something I hope Chevy includes in the Z06 when that time comes. Something else very interesting about that air intake is you can clearly see two different hoses running right up to it, which means it looks like it still is pulling air from other locations as well. One of them looks like it's running straight to the back bumper, so it's possibly pulling it from the outside of the rear bumper somewhere. Either way, this car is definitely not going to be starved for air. You all get to see it on TV, YouTube, all over the place here very soon, but the actual race that the car is really preparing for doesn't really start until January 25th. So that's when you can really bank on seeing this car on your TV. Now, next little bit of information about the C8 Corvette, not the C8R, but specifically the C8 we'll be able to buy and drive here very soon, comes from the Corvette forum. One of the users actually asked Taj, during the recent interview with Jay Leno on his garage show, you mentioned that the new car will be in a reduced torque output mode during the car's initial break-in period. Can you elaborate on the purpose for that and explain to the folks what happens at 500 miles? Does the engine's full output happen automatically due to programming, or is it something that will require a maintenance visit? Taj answers and says, thanks for the question. This is a good opportunity to clear up a few things. For as long as I can remember, we have recommended a 500-mile break-in period for new cars, not just Corvettes, but all new GM cars. It has been emphasized in the owner's materials with further definition around brakes and driveline. Starting with the 7th generation Corvette, we established a variable red line on the tach to give drivers a visual indication on when it would be advisable to take it easy on the car. We used it for the first 500 miles of driving and when the engine was coming up to operating temperature after break-in was complete. Our reconfigurable display enabled us to do that. We didn't actually limit the torque, horsepower, or RPM. It was just a visual indication. Despite the tach and owner's instructions, some customers use the full capability of the car immediately. We have seen too many videos of people doing burnouts off the dealer lot or showing up to a track, both road course and drag strip, with nearly 0 miles. Taking any green and cold engine to the max torque and speed can cause undesirable wear patterns that could affect engine operation over the long term. Running full torque through the trans under the same conditions can score gears, especially those in the differential after the engine torque has been multiplied. We have had some examples of customers not observing the break-in guidelines and then returning the car to the dealer with complaints of gear noise or differential whine. For the 8th generation Corvette, we have taken it one step further. With more weight on the rear, the car has more traction and we are taking advantage of that with more aggressive gearing. That translates into more torque multiplication and more loads in the driveline. We decided for the first 500 miles to limit maximum torque in first and second gears. The torque reduction is roughly 25 to 30% depending on which transaxle, standard or Z51, and which gear. That may sound like a big reduction, but in reality the car is still very fast. In fact, you could easily spin the tires on some surfaces. Engine speed is not limited at all. It will wind out to redline. We will still be asking customers to stay off max torque and speed for the first 500 miles. We know it's hard to stay patient when such performance is available, but it will pay off in the long run. So guys, that's a long-winded way of saying the C8 Corvette will limit its torque output for the first 500 miles until everything sets in and GM is certain that the car will be good to go. Now this is pretty interesting because just like he said, the C7 Corvette limited the same kind of stuff, but it did it visually. There was no actual physical limitation put on the car like there is gonna be with the C8 Corvette. It's pretty cool if you ask me. I always was one for following the instructions from GM because GM built the car, let's face it, they know it better than anybody else does. If they say you should stay off the throttle until 500 miles, then you should probably stay off the throttle until 500 miles. Interesting information coming straight from Taj himself. Now, lastly is a little bit of information that came out a couple days ago that I didn't have a chance to report on yet because of the holidays, and that is the 2020 C8 Corvette's Nurburgring Lap Time being leaked. If you guys haven't heard about this yet, the leaked lap time for the C8 is showing a 7 minutes, 28 second time. Now, at first glance, I was disappointed with this time, I'll be honest with you. But after looking at some of the cars that are able to do it in that time or slower, it's actually a pretty big jump in time from the C7 to the C8 comparable Stingray models. Now, as you guys know, the C7 Corvette never got quote-unquote official track times for the Nurburgring, but there was a lot of stuff leaked or talked about from Jim Merrow. Basically, the fastest C7 around the Nurburgring was, of course, the ZR1, and it came in at a possible 6 minutes and 58 seconds. I say possible because Jim Merrow was never able to complete the lap with warm tires, etc. This is the time that they came to the conclusion of via his segmented times, which basically just means that his time was taken at certain points of the track and then put together at the very end. Anyway, what the real good comparison here is the C8 Stingray to the C7 Stingray. Ultimately, comparing the C8 to any other car other than the previous generation's Stingray is kind of unfair. So, that car saw a lap time around the Nürburgring of 7 minutes and 33 seconds. The C8 Corvette doing it in 7 minutes and 28 seconds is literally 5 seconds faster around that track. Some of you may go, well, 5 seconds, that's not that big of a deal, but on a track, 1 second is a huge advantage. The C8 is literally 5 seconds faster than the C7 Stingray comparable model, both Z51 setups. This is likely due to that lightning fast shifting capability that the C8 has due to its dual clutch transmission. Either way, the car is definitely turning out to be quite the performer. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked what you saw and heard, give me a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about the content you heard here today, leave them in the comment section down below or send me an email, horse.power.obsessed@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please do, guys. I have one of my own C8s coming very soon, and you're going to love the stuff that I'm doing to it. You're definitely not going to want to miss that. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next upload.